The school budget and the upcoming override vote are on the warrant, and it's getting a lot of attention. So today we're sitting down with DY School Superintendent Marc Smith to have him help us break it down. Next. Welcome, Marc, to the Your Yarmouth Podcast. It's so great to have you here.
It's great to be here.
Now, whether you're a taxpayer or a parent or someone that just wants to be informed, the school budget has been a hot topic. Can we just dive right in? Can you kind of break it down for us where we stand this year?
Yeah, so the school budget is a perpetual topic in both towns, and this year I know, particularly in the town of Yarmouth, but both towns are dealing with a potential override vote or an override vote in both towns. And so I know that's why I'd like to be here today, to talk a little bit about that and try to get some information out to everybody to be able to understand exactly what it is we're dealing with.
I know I've heard the term reserved service budget, and I think I know what that means, but can you explain that a little bit?
Yeah, so typically when we're talking about trying to move things forward in any budget, any town-based budget or school-based budget, we're trying to, at a minimum, keep the same services that we provide to our constituents. So in this case, obviously, it's students and families, right? And what we've put forward, unfortunately, this year is a reduced number of services to the students and families in DY. And particularly in this year, what we're talking about is some reduced opportunities for student electives at the high school, and some increased class sizes at some of our lower levels. And that is with the budget that was approved by the school committee if we get the overrides.
Okay.
So the best analogy I could use would be, on the town side, is if in 1 year you expect the dump to be open 7 days a week, and that's the normal service people are used to. But if the town had to put forward a reduced service budget and they weren't able, they would be 5 days a week. Right. Exactly.
So big question, where does the money go?
So big picture, 72 cents of every dollar in the school budget goes to personnel. So we're a people business. Our biggest thing is teachers working with students, and then leadership positions that oversee students or the staff that work with students, oversee the staff that work with students. But it's 72 cents on every dollar goes to personnel and the associated costs with personnel, benefits, etc. And then 10 cents on every dollar goes to tuition costs, for some students who go to other school districts, whether that's out of district placements for students who have really significant special needs costs, or charter school tuition, and some students who school choice out of the district. And then we have about another 7% or 7 cents on every dollar goes to transportation. So at that point now you're up to 89 cents on every dollar. Yeah. And then the rest are some fixed costs, and then we're down to small percentages of the district budget. But the big part is personnel.
And you've already made some cuts to get here.
Yeah. So we're at in the reduced service budget. It has 15 staffing cuts in it. That's
a lot.
Yeah. And we'd had, my first budget as superintendent, so going into the 24-25 school year, we had 33 staffing cuts that year, which was largely a right-sizing effort. We had been coming off the federal money that had come from the towns mostly refer to it as ARPA money. It was ESSER money, was specifically for schools, but that was money, all the COVID money. And the district had seen some enrollment shifts and changes over a 10-year period, so it was an opportunity for the school district to do a little bit of right sizing. So we were able to make those cuts with a minimal impact on students and on families, but these changes we've already sort of done that. You can only right size really once unless you see a significant enrollment change.
What are the biggest expenses right now that you're seeing?
Yeah, so we've seen increases. I would highlight some of the bigger ones. So one big one is health insurance increase for our employees. So it's an 8% increase for this year. We're part of the same buying group as both towns. Most of the school districts on the Cape, most of the towns on the Cape.
Health insurance is a big one.
Yeah. Another one for us is transportation. So the big buses that you see out on the school on the roads every day. It's a 5% increase for next year. Another big one is that those out-of-district placements that I mentioned. That's increase at a 4.5%. Utilities. I mean, everybody's seeing the cost of electricity and natural gas go up. Mm-hmm. Schools are not immune from that. That's a 13% increase for next year. And then a real big one in the line is a specialized transportation for McKinney-Vento, which is unhoused students. Otherwise known as homeless students, right? That's a 338% increase.
That one jumped out at me.
Yeah.
I said, now why is that?
So it's a twofold challenge. So one is a little bit more sort of the larger dynamics of the Cape, right? So part of that is that the challenge that I know a lot of us are having conversations around, which is a lack of housing. Mm-hmm. So people that have been priced out of their ability to afford housing here. And so we've seen a significant increase in the number of students or families rather that are unhoused. So we've seen over the last 3 years, each year the number of students who are unhoused double. So the number keeps doubling. Yeah. And then also the cost to transport continues to increase. So we can't provide most of that transportation ourselves. Okay. We have to secure private transportation companies. And so the rate for each day for transporting a student, that it's essentially a supply and demand market. So the supply keeps going up. No, excuse me, the other way around. The demand keeps going up. The supply for transportation to vendors is limited. So they have cornered the market, and the price to move students keeps going up and up and up.
And we know gas prices are up.
Right, exactly.
Well, and that doesn't help. Can you explain the two-town involvement, the Dennis-Yarmouth partnership in the school system? Because some people may find it a bit confusing.
Yeah. I think the first thing to try to help explain is most people think about the roughly 70-30 split, right? That Yarmouth is responsible for 70% of the assessment and Dennis is responsible for 30% of the assessment. And that's part of the equation, but it's not the whole picture. Mm-hmm. So it's actually a 3-step process to get from the school district's operating budget to the assessments in the town. The 70-30 split is actually the 3rd step in that 3-step process. Okay. First step is the school district takes off from its budget all its revenue, so all the monies that come into the district. A big one is is money that comes directly from the state. Big part of that is Chapter 70 funding. We also get regional transportation aid, but then there's also local revenues, the solar fields. We get Medicaid funding. We get other places where monies come direct. So that never gets charged to the two towns because it comes directly into the school district. Okay. That's step number 1. Then step number 2, and this is the part that oftentimes changes the assessment increase to the two towns, is what's called the minimum local contribution. So that is set by the state. The district has no control over that. And it's a foundation number.
Didn't know that.
Yeah, based on 2 factors, property wealth and what's determined as ability to pay, which is largely determined by the median wealth, or the median wealth of the taxpayers in the community. It comes from the taxes we all file at the end of the year, right? And so that almost always goes up each year, the minimum required. Now, both towns pay well above the minimum. So it's not about whether or not each town is paying the minimum, but it's the first thing sort of look at the assessment as a 2-part bill. So it's the first part of the bill that we have to charge to the 2 towns. Now, almost every year, the minimum local contribution goes up for the 2 communities. The challenge is it doesn't go up proportionately. So last year, it went up more for Dennis than it did for Yarmouth. But this year, Yarmouth's increased by just about 3.5%, where
Okay.
Dennis increased by about 1.5%.
Okay.
So imagine it a two-part bill,
Yeah.
and the first part of the bill went up by roughly 2% more for one town than it did for the other town.
All right.
Then whatever's left above that minimum,
Yeah.
then gets split by a 5-year rolling average, which is where that roughly is just under 70% and just over 30% gets split for the two towns. But it's after that minimum local contribution has first been taken. So then you add all that together, and that's what gets assessed to the two towns.
Okay.
And so this year, because of that difference in proportion, you get an assessment. So our overall operating budget is up by 4.2%, but the assessment to the town of Yarmouth is up almost 6%,
Okay.
where Dennis's assessment is up under our overall operating budget increase. And that ultimately comes down to that difference in the minimum required contribution.
Because I know that sometimes people may just see that Yarmouth is paying more, the increase is higher. Why are we paying more when we share the same, schools? So that was a great explanation of that. Appreciate that. Now let's talk about the override. What do you need this year?
So for the town of Yarmouth, it's a $1.48 million override, so it's not a small number. I know it breaks down for the median household to roughly $90 a year. 13 cents per 1,000
Okay. All right.
is the estimated tax increase. This is to fund that reduced service budget. If it doesn't pass, then...
That's my next question.
Yeah, so if it doesn't pass, then there's a couple of things that will happen, or that can happen. The school district... mostly from a process standpoint, the school district, the school committee has an opportunity to they have a 45-day window to reconsider the budget. In that time, the school committee could potentially propose a reduced budget,
Okay.
which could then go back to the towns to try to fund a reduced budget, either to try to attempt another override or find an alternative way to fund. They could call what's called a special super town meeting. Which
I was going to ask about, would you need a different town meeting for that?
Yeah. Yes. Either way you
Yeah.
would. You can't pass any of this without the voter approval,
Yeah.
right? Unless the school committee ultimately decided to pass a budget that met the voter approved budget without the override, right?
Okay.
So, and on the Yarmouth side, so a 1.48 million, and I'm using round numbers, 1.48 million override failure would mean reducing 2.2 million from the school's budget. And now most people are like, well, why do you have to reduce 2.2 million if it's only a $1.4 million override? And that goes back to that assessment piece, right? So the school district can't just say, okay, town of Yarmouth, we're not going to take your $1.4 million and we're still going to charge Dennis their portion.
Yeah.
You have to reduce the overall budget
Yeah.
by enough that you're not assessing Yarmouth their portion. And it comes from that extra part above the minimum. You can't say the two towns can't pay their minimum. You have to come from that part above the minimum, which is that roughly 70-30 split. So 70%, 1.48 million is 70% of $2.2 million.
So the override is important. And if you don't get it, there's going to be more cuts, I'm guessing. Is that going to affect classroom sizes more so than already? After school activities, sporting events, sports teams? How does that work? How do you figure that out?
Yeah, so we presented to the school committee on April 6th meeting a contingency plan if the override doesn't fail. And we worked off the worst case scenario because Dennis, again, is looking at an override as well, which has an impact. It's just a smaller impact. It's about a $1.1 million effect on our budget. But so we worked off the worst case scenario, which is a $2.2 million, and presented an option to the school committee. And it's 37 and a half additional positions on top of that. And so plus some, cuts to like technology things that we need to do, cuts to stipended positions. So, there's full-time staffing positions, but then staff get stipends to do things like coach sports, to run after-school clubs, etc. So, yeah, we would see cuts to freshman sports, JV sports, not all JV sports, but some of the JV sports, all the freshman sports, middle school clubs, all after school activities through the 7th grade.
What about services like counseling and that kind of thing? Would that be a potential?
Yeah, we'd have reduced counselors are some of the cuts we would see, reduced teaching positions. So you're going to see, going back to your question about increased class sizes, reduced administrative positions, so assistant principals. The original cuts, those 15 cuts that I mentioned before, have reduced positions out of the superintendent's office already in it. So then we would see assistant principal cuts as well. We would see, trying to remember the entire list. We have cuts to administrative assistants positions. Really, they're like spread across the entire district. At this point, if it
there's
ends up,
a lot.
Yeah, and at this point, you have to protect. Essentially what we refer to as the core programming.
Right.
So you have to make sure you can still teach English, math, science, and social studies.
Yeah.
You have to make sure you can provide special education service. It's a legal mandate. You have to make sure you can provide for English language learners service, another legal mandate. You have to make sure that you can provide transportation. We're required to provide transportation. Yep. And then you start to get into, I don't like to call them extras, but outside of that core, what are some of the things that you are part of a well-rounded education, but if you have to start to limit some of those things, what are some of those things that, because if the override doesn't fail, we still have to open a school district in September. If the override does fail, we still have to open a school district in September. So we have to start to plan for potentially what that would be.
So what do you say to the residents that are not parents and don't have a real vested, child in the system, and they might be on the fence about this? What can you say to them to really tell them how important this is?
Yeah, I think I would say a couple of things. I would say one, healthy schools equals healthy community.
Yep.
Healthy schools support strong property values, strong graduates come back to support your community. Yep. I would say that going back to the point that 72 cents on every dollar is invested in personnel, and these personnel, a lot of DY people, staff, live in our community. Yeah.
Have grown up here.
They've grown
probably.
up here. Yeah. Yep. So, they're paying taxes back in this community. They're taking care of people back in this community. They're raising kids back in this community. Right. So it's an investment back in your community.
It all comes back around.
Right. And then I would also say, just take a look at us compared to every, what's going on around. Right. Yeah. So we are, our operating budget, and I get the assessment increase is different, to which I have no control over. But as an operating budget, we're up 4.223%. If we look at school districts are up and down the Cape, we're lower than most. Yep. Most are seeing a 5% increase. Both towns are looking at operational budget increases in or around the same, because we're all facing the same challenges, right? I understand the select board has a policy that they want to keep the assessment at 2.5%, but the cost increases are above 2.5%. Yep. So, and both towns are looking at increasing their operational costs above 2.5% because they need to. Because again, they buy their health insurance in the same place, they get their utilities in the same place, right? And this isn't a conversation about schools versus public safety because we're all in the same boat. We all have the same challenges. So I don't want to get into a conversation about we should make cuts at other places versus the schools, right? Yeah.
Are there any misconceptions about this budget or the override that you'd like to clear up?
Yeah, I mean, I've heard a couple. Like, one is that, Dennis-Yarmouth is like administrative heavy, right? And we aren't. We run a pretty lean ship. I have over 600 employees, and every organization needs some people to manage employees, right? Every organization has leadership positions, and we have 33 leaders for 630 employees. That's pretty good ratio for any organization. So that would be my first piece, is just making sure people understand that leadership is important. And if we're going to improve the school district, which is one of my goals, we need to make sure we continue to invest in things that are going to help move us forward. I think the second piece is I get questions about transparency all the time. Like, people want to see, where is our budget? They want to understand the detail, and it is all available on our website.
Here it is.
Yeah, we post everything.
Yeah.
You can find our end of the year reports on our website. You can find every budget presentation.
To you. Yeah.
Line item detail is available in our school committee packets when we've presented around the budget. And if you can't find something, email us and we'll get it to you, because I don't believe there's anything to hide. So I'm happy to provide any additional information that people feel like they can't find.
What worries you the most about the way things are trending?
I think that, we have, I grew up here on the Cape, right? So I see the pinch, and quite frankly, I grew up here, and I have multiple generations of my family have grown up here, and we've made a bunch of decisions here on the Cape, good, bad, or indifferent, that have placed a lot of burden on the resident tax base, right? And this problem isn't going to go away. There's a need for services, whether it's from police, fire, DPW services, and school services. And we've made a bunch of decisions, the big we, right? I live in a different town, but the same town is looking at an override for the same reasons, right?
Everyone's kind of in the same boat.
Yeah, we're all in the same boat. And I just don't see this bigger problem going away, because there's a structural issue here that we need to think of collectively about how to, and I'm not a policymaker. It's not my decision on how the best way forward to do this is, but I do think this is a challenge, because I understand the taxpayer who's worried about their tax bill. I get it. Again, I'm facing the same decision, as a taxpayer in a different community that's looking at an override as well. I understand the pressure. And so that's what sort of worries me, is that this problem, if we want to call it a problem, it doesn't have, this is a short-term solution for a larger structural thing that we need to talk about as communities as a whole.
That last push to get people to come out and vote on the 28th, what do you want to tell them?
I think it's, if you support the schools, if you think, that you want, this, I can't tell people how to vote, right? So I guess I would just say, if you have questions, be sure to ask them. And if you think that the DY is doing the right thing and that you want to continue to support that, then just come out and show that with your vote. And if you think otherwise, I just encourage people to exercise their voice, right?
Right.
That's my job. And I really believe in sharing as much information as I can. That's my job, is to share the information. And I know everything that we've put out has been factual and accurate. I know some people have accused us of putting the cuts on as scare tactics. It's not.
It's reality.
This is the reality. This is what we will. This is the school district that we will lead if the override doesn't fail, and we will open, and this will be the school district. And if that's not what you want, then I encourage you to come and vote, and I guess that would be it.
Well, thank you so much, Marc, for joining us on the Your Yarmouth podcast today. I really appreciate it. We appreciate everything you do for the community and for the students. It doesn't go unnoticed. So good luck to you on the 28th. And just to recap, if you are interested in getting more information, diving a little bit deeper into the school budget, you can go to the Dennis-Yarmouth Regional School website. It should be listed right there on your screen. And as always, you can follow us on social media, our website, our YouTube channel, Channel 8, and you can find us anywhere that you get your podcast. Remember, Yarmouth, your vote matters. We hope to see you on the 28th.